Alrighty. Hello everybody, welcome to the stream today. My name is SenseiSuplex, and today we have the likes of the D&D Sensei show. I hope each and every single one of you guys are all ready for an epic sort of talk for the likes of, or that we've been trying to get ready for, I don't know, weeks, almost a month or whatever at this point. It's been a fun time though, trying to be able to talk to the likes of our special guests of this evening. But before we end up sort of exactly introducing who these lovely individuals are, we have a little bit of introduction. So everybody in chat, everybody on YouTube, Twitch, or wherever the heck you guys are watching this, what if I told you that these two beautiful bearded nerds were able to take over an entire portion of YouTube? These individuals named Ted and Dave, but across all the D&D sphere, they are known as Nerdarchy. Today we're here to talk about their journey in D&D content creation and how they got started, as well as the evolution of TTRPGs over the decades. So hey, if this sounds interesting to you, grab a snack, grab a drink, and grab your notepads for the knowledge that'll be dropped today, as it's time for the Sensei show as we get started with everything. So that being said, special guests Nerdarchy Ted and Nerdarchist Dave. How have you guys been? Welcome.
Good. How are you? It's been a little while. I really enjoyed our chats. I'm happy to come back and bring Nerdarchist Ted with me as well.
Yeah.
Absolute pleasure to be here. Happy to talk about, answer whatever you got on the agenda.
Heck yeah. It's gonna be a wild and fun time, so I hope you guys are ready. I may throw a couple curveballs at you. Not really, I'm kidding, but you'll be good. So hey, everybody kind of knows a little bit about me, at least if they're sort of tuning into the stream, and no one really cares about me at this point. Let's get a couple introductions off at this point. Nerdarchy, if you guys could, please introduce yourselves to all the people and tell them exactly who you are and kind of what you do.
All right, so I am Nerdarchist Dave, co-founder of Nerdarchy, and we are a YouTube channel, website, and we also create products for 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. Although currently we're actually working on another RPG called Zoo Mafia.
Yeah. Heard a lot of stuff about that.
I'm one of the other co-founders. I'm Nerdarchist Ted. Nerdarchy's been around for a little over 8 years. We started off being very, just nerd in general and talked about a lot of different things. And, once 5th edition kind of dropped, it was like, oh, it's a thing that, all of us, really care about. Let's get into it. And our channel quickly evolved into, we are just the 5e guys. And, we've been doing 5e videos for almost a decade at this point in time. So a lot of fun, a lot of stuff to talk about. And there's always stuff to talk about.
Awesome stuff. That is amazing, because I kind of mentioned this briefly before to Dave on our last sort of talk over on your guys' channel. Yeah, I mean, I've been watching you guys for a long while, since I even kind of started getting into the whole D&D sphere. So, and we'll talk a little bit more about your general impact or whatever across that little small portion of the internet, right? But yeah, you guys have been killing it so far, so I love the content, and again, I'm super glad to have you guys onto the likes of the stream today. But I guess a couple introductions for anybody just joining on in who doesn't know me. My name is SenseiSuplex. I am a professional dungeon master and also the lead of a giant persistent universe known as Project Dora. We basically run a whole grand holder of universe where me and a bunch of other dungeon masters run all of our games in the same world that can affect each other in a multitude of ways. So it's kind of like a West Marches, but it's a little bit more advanced than that, because all of the likes of the community that we have, they get involved in the likes of the world building and craziness as we decide to basically put all of our minds together and have a great, fantastic time leaving our mark on a giant universe. But that's basically what I do. I do that over Twitch and YouTube and all that, but hey, whatever.
Hey, I had a quick question for you. How do you track all the changes that happen across all the different campaigns?
Hope and pray. No, I'm kidding. But nah, so tracking all the changes, a lot of the time what it comes down to, so we're trying to get, really lock down on the sort of nitty gritty, right? We have, at this point now, dedicated individuals. Sometimes they're just actual fellow dungeon masters, but we have a specific role called a lore archivist, and they're just a person who kind of sits in the likes of the Discord channel, and they're going to be writing down all the sort of nuances, like, oh, okay, Jim Bob the Barbarian decided to steal from the tavern keep, and they stole XYZ item, right? And it just goes into a log, and if any other DM like goes into said tavern, then they will get a little list of information that they need to know, like, oh, well, this item isn't here anymore, blah 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 blah, right? That sort of whole thing. We're trying to make it like more organized, like that sort of system, right?
Well, it's awesome that you have a community that is able to do that kind of stuff, because that would be quite exhausting to try and have the DM, and in addition to running the game, to have to kind of catalog that stuff as well.
Yeah.
Me and Ted each ran a campaign for 5 years when 5e first dropped, and we ran it out of the same town. But like, we were a player in each other's games, so tracking things wasn't that big of a deal, because in some capacity or another you were there. But across multiple GMs where you're not in all the games would be much more challenging.
But it was still a little bit of a factor of like, okay, in this game this thing happened, and then in the next game the other group is trying to undo. So there were a lot of back and forth slotting that happened. But as Dave said, like, we were both present, so it wasn't quite as difficult.
That's interesting. So actually, I do want to talk about that sort of thing a little bit more, but we're gonna jump it directly into that in just a second. So here, I want to really talk about like exactly how you guys kind of got introduced to D&D, and like kind of what was like playing back like way long ago, before I started getting started playing D&D, especially 5th edition, way before that was sort of out. I really want to talk about that sort of whole thing. So I got a little bit of a thing. So guys, chat, if you don't know, these individuals have been playing D&D and TTRPGs since its conception. They were at the round table with Vecna and Gary Gygax themselves. No, I'm kidding. That's not really. That's a lie. But what's not a lie is that these individuals have been playing TTRPGs for a very long time. And because of that, that's why I really want to look into how you both kind of got started with D&D and TTRPGs in general. Dave, you mentioned like it was... you mentioned a little bit about it, but I really want to go in depth with that. So, hey, if either of you want to take it away.
Yeah, I'll jump in first and then throw it to Ted. First of all, I think what Sensei's really saying is we're just both old. But
that's not what I'm saying. No.
That aside, I remember being like really young, like I want to say like the 5 to 7 range, and my older neighbor Ian Wilson came over with the red box in his hands, and I remember him sitting in my living room, and we had this like horrible looking cranberry red like velvet couch, and us kneeling on the floor, and the shag carpet, because it was a long time ago. You might have to Google that, some of you kids. And opening that box and looking at all the pictures and stuff, and we didn't really do anything with it. Then he took me to one of his friends' house, which had even older brothers, and they were running sessions of a game from TSR called Gamma World. And I remember making a character and playing at least one session, and then like I wouldn't touch D&D for several years. After that, I would see it again in my tweens, early teens, when we were playing backyard sports. And again, one of the older kids in the neighborhood, one of our friends' older brothers, said, after, I think we were playing like Run the Bases or Wiffle Ball or something. It's like, hey, you guys want to play this game? And that's when he introduced us to 1st edition AD&D. And I remember that summer we just did nothing but play AD&D, and like every week it seemed like someone was grabbing a new game from TSR to bring over, whether it was Top Secret or Marvel Superheroes or Gangbusters. It's like every genre, and we would like play one session of all of those games, and that was it. But we'd always like go back to playing D&D, and that's how I got into the hobby. So I played it all in my like early teens, and then I would take a break into my early 20s, and that's kind of where I hook up with Ted.
Yeah, that's interesting. I love that. So, oh my gosh. So actually, yeah, go ahead, Ted. How'd you get into D&D?
If you're not overly familiar with Nerdarchy, Dave is actually my brother-in-law. He married my sister, for good or for ill, whatever that is. So he shows up this one time, and by this point in time, I've already been playing D&D for years. I got started around 12, 13. I'm about 30 years into the TTRPG hobby. But the majority of my pre-Nerdarchy time, it was all just D&D. So I got started with second edition, and it was, as almost always happens, it was shown by one of the older kids in my scout troop, and we gravitated towards it. I immediately got involved, but didn't fully understand the rules, because it was like, well, we got access to the information, but no guidance as to how to properly control the story until like somebody else who actually wanted to sit down and read the rules. So like our first I guess my first year or two playing the game, it was more just, let's narrate a story and understand that there's the dice that are involved, but none of the actual hardships. You're like, oh, well, I want to just kill this thing. Oh, roll the die. Oh, I rolled high. That means it happened. So like we had these ridiculous stories, and like we were using maps from other board games that like looked more like a dungeon layout, or like the fold-out maps that came with Dragon Magazine, or wherever else I had these things. And like we were partially doing it, but we weren't really playing by the real rules, and there was no risk of death. But once I had somebody else like decide, no, we're going to do this right, and we're going to set up a real campaign. We rolled characters properly, as opposed to just assigning whatever number we wanted to our stats. And then we got to really play, and like, despite the lack of danger, with the original way we were playing, following the rules became like, oh, well, now we can really tell a story. Now there is a really risk-reward scenario. And about the time I turned like 17, 18 years old, as I said, Dave rolls onto the scene, and we wound up setting up a formal group, which was to later, in the evolution of our life, become Nerdarchy. And we played together for a long time, rarely, missing a Saturday despite our lives. But, it was just a gaming group. We got together and we rolled dice, we talked in funny voices, and we had fun.
Oh man, that is amazing. That is amazing. So actually, I had a question on this sort of thing. Oop, got a little bit of feedback. Something from you, Dave.
All right. I'm not sure. I just unmuted. I was muted.
Test us. All right, we're good. So my question that I actually came up with this yesterday, because I was just sort of brainstorming about this. So how did you mentioned it a little bit, but how exactly did you kind of like learn that D&D even really existed? You know what I mean? So like nowadays we have like freaking everything is just shoved in your face. You can find any bit of information anywhere or whatever, right? But was like, how'd you guys even learn like, hey, this is a game or whatever that people are playing, and then maybe I want to get started with playing it right here now? Was it just word of mouth? Was it maybe you even saw it in like a magazine or something? How did that sort of go?
I think if you like listen to our like kind of like our origin stories, how we got into it, like that's the common theme: an older kid in the neighborhood or in your scout troop, So here's the thing, right? Like, the person that really got me into playing, like we all thought he was cool because he would play sports with us, and he was like, I think he was like 17. And we were all like 13, 14, the same age as his sister. And we're like, oh, Steve is so cool, right? And then like in hindsight, not so much. He was a great guy, and but he was one of the nerdy kids. And so like, I think back then it was hard to find a group. So I think a lot of times what people ended up doing is like finding younger kids that were kind of impressionable and would look up to you because you're older, and then you rope them into playing. I can't confirm for sure, but I think that was the method.
You think that was the method for everybody? Like pretty much a common sort of
all the way back to Gary Gygax. There's just like one older kid rounding up more younger kids to get them to play the game.
So I mean, I've always been a consummate nerd. Whenever something nerdy comes out, it's like, oh, let me get involved with this. Let me check it out. But the fact that, especially in the late '80s, early '90s, when this stuff started kind of gathering some reach, um, we, if you go to the comic book store, like there were no gaming stores back then, so like that's where you would kind of get some exposure. So if you would kind of hang around and like talk, sometimes the attendants that would work there would be like, oh, you're looking for this, you're looking for that. They might direct you towards, oh, well, have you tried this whole thing? Especially with the Marvel superhero game. Oh, you're reading comic books. Do you want to be your own superhero?
They might direct you to the 2 shelves that had D&D books on them.
Pretty much.
The one rack that had a variety of RPGs, back then. But I mean, for me, it was just it was the kid in the scout troop that was just kind of there, and it was such a gloss over in my early part of it. Like, I remember my first serious campaign that my friend Chris ran, and we played basically whenever we could. It was like, school day's over, homework is done. We'd all hop on our bikes and ride to Chris's house, and we're gonna go play for a couple hours. Or I'm gonna ride on the other side of town and go play at Vince's house, or wherever it was. It was just, getting access to whatever you could. And like nowadays, kids aren't going here and going there. They're I've got a phone or I've got a computer. I don't need to go see people. And I'm like, what?
Yeah, you did not. Like, I feel like you didn't find D&D by accident. More than likely, D&D found you. And Ted mentioned comic book stores. I know there were gaming stores back then, but there were not many. And I got all my gaming books from B. Dalton or Walden Books. And they used to be stores that pretty much every mall had one. They actually had each of one at the opposite ends of the mall. And I would just drag my grandparents from one to the other and stand in front of those racks until they would buy me something from them. That was my strategy.
Oh my goodness. So actually, you kind of mentioned a little bit with the sort of whole comic book stores, and then just even just saying, hey, we're converting the younglings, hey, play D&D with me, right? What was the most common way that you guys saw of being able to find other people to play D&D with? Was it mainly the comic book store or game stores?
So I think it was I remember trying to convert my friends when I was in my teens. I had kind of moved away from the one friend group that used to play more often, not physically but socially. And so I remember trying to recruit a bunch of my different friends, and they were all kind of burnouts and stoners back then. And they gave it a try, but it didn't last very long, and it was not very serious. Honestly, it wasn't until, I had started dating my wife, Ted's sister, and I met Ted, and I was at a pivotal point in my life where I was like, I need something to take up my time. And if I don't find something good, I'm just going to do bad stuff probably. And so I turned to D&D. I connected with one of my old friends and Ted. And then we recruited my brother, my youngest brother, and one of Ted's friends. And from that, we formed a group that in some way or another would kind of stuck around for, I don't know, I guess I was in my early 20s then, so over 25 years at this point, 25 years-ish.
To be fair, of that group, it's down to just me, Dave, and Ryan, or to me, Dave, and his younger brother, and that's the only part of that original group that stuck. But we've been gaming together for that long, so it's pretty great.
Although I will say Mark has been gaming with us for a very long time. He came onto the scene a bit later. And again, even then it was still hard. I guess we're into the internet age at that point, so that wasn't as bad, but he's even older than I am. So, he wasn't he's not exactly internet savvy, but he noticed that he would go to church outings because he was in choir with my wife. And he'd be like, your husband is never here on Saturdays. where is he? And she's like, oh, he games. And he's like, really? Because he gamed in college, you know, and his GameDar went off, and then from that she introduced us to each other, and since then, like, he's my daughter's godfather. I've been his best man at his wedding, and like he's been gaming with us for I don't know how long right at this point. My daughter's 17, so longer than that.
So actually, two things. One thing that I notice is when it comes to D&D, just like running the game in general, do you think that, I know it's weird, but do you think that like playing D&D with friends, do you think that like strengthens a lot more friendships, or that kind of lasts a lot more long term compared to maybe even people that you just met and they sort of fell into your life, and you know what I mean? Like, do you think playing D&D made a more lasting relationship with people than the people that you didn't play D&D with?
Depending upon the personality and play style, it is either going to, give you this bond that nothing else is really gonna, work with. And it's not gonna be the same. I mean, there's other things that could equally compare, but or it's gonna absolutely divide the two of you.
I can see that.
When you look at two very different play styles, and we've heard countless stories of gaming incidents that have happened, and we've had some of our own at our own tables that it's just like, all right, this is oil and water. These are not going to mix very well. We should just figure out a solution here. But I mean, I've got people that I used to game with that if they were to kind of reach out and contact me, even though I haven't seen them in years, haven't talked to them in years, I would welcome back to the group, or I'd be, thrilled to have them at my table, or just talk if they're not into the hobby.
Yeah.
So it's a scenario that, it's a hobby of, shared feelings and, shared interests. And if you don't get into it and you're not into it, you're not going to understand. But those who do totally get it and totally have that relatability.
Yeah. I don't want to get like super psychological or anything like that. I think I read some sort of study, I don't know, somewhere on the internet, right? That mentioned like you feel like, people are able to make like a more of a connection with one another if like they feel as if they're creating something together. And in D&D, I mean, you're creating stuff all the time. You're going through multiple adventures, you're creating memories, and you're literally sitting there for hours upon end every week or however long you play. And it's like, yeah, I mean, hey, at a certain point, we're probably going to kind of maybe be our friends, but go ahead.
So like if you were to say like, okay, oh, I've been playing this character for 2 years and he died last night. the mortification, the like, holy crap, people are going to respond who understand, like, oh, I'm so sorry, tell me about it, and allow you to live that moment where people who don't have a clue, like, so is it your fictional character died and you're upset?
Yeah.
Like
they don't understand
that, that there is a connection, when you play a character for a long time, that's like, all right, it's just, ink on a page, but at the same time, like, there's a relationship there. It's, it's something that you've invested energy and time and thought into, and to say, all right, it's gone, that sucks.
100%.
Yeah, kind of like adding on to what you were saying, Sensei, is that I've also heard a study where, like, when people experience D&D, they don't experience it the same way they do other forms of media, because when they talk about it, they're like, I or my character, right? So it's very personal.
Yeah.
It's as if they've done it, right? Like, in some ways, like, it registers in your brain as if you went through something traumatic, like, through a war with someone together.
Yeah.
Not that I'm equating playing D&D to being in war, but it builds that kind of similar camaraderie with the people that you're doing it with. And because it's such a personal thing, and it's as if whatever's happening in the game is happening to you, it's not happening to the character. So I think that really helps to deepen the bonds with the people that you do meet. And also, I find a lot of problems at the table arise when you try and play the game without also trying to have a personal connection or a friendship with the other people at the table. You know, because you need to have empathy with the other people at the table if you want to have a better experience at the table.
Yeah, because again, it's a group sort of game. It's a group dynamic. You got to be able to, you know, be flexible enough to get that going, right?
You know, you want to make sure that everybody has their turn to speak, and you know, give everyone their moment to shine. You know, if you're a spotlight hog, like, that's definitely going to lessen the experience of everyone at the table, except for you, who are like, okay, you know, it's high and mighty me.
Right. Oh man. So actually, I wanted to go a little bit backwards on one sort of thing. So I remember, like, you guys were saying, like, hey, we'd just be playing pretty much D&D whenever we could for a brief moment in time, right? You would be going like, hey, we're gonna go over this person's house and just play D&D after school. We're gonna go play D&D over at this person's house, and that's just, it is what it is. Now, one of the biggest downfalls for campaigns and D&D in general, it's scheduling. Most of the times, a lot of the campaigns, they end up flunking out because of scheduling. So I wonder, was scheduling issues like just as bad back then as they are now, or no?
Scheduling has always been the nightmare of every D&D player. Now, I think, like, when Ted was talking about, and I had a similar experience, as a kid, you have less responsibilities, less things going on. So you played a lot, and also those your brain is still developing, so those memories are much more formative than the ones that we make in adulthood. You know, so those really stick. As for scheduling as an adult, this is a bane. For the longest time, we had our Saturday night group, and like, we were pretty religious about meeting Saturday nights, and most people were on board for that. We were a little bit on the fanatical side, I would say. Like, there's definitely people that would have their girlfriend call them out at D&D night because they did not want the ball breaking that was coming their way. I like to think we've grown as humans and individuals since then, but it was the 80s and 90s. It was brutal.
Yeah. That's something.
So, you know, so the availability or scheduling, you know, definitely created some problems. You know, when I was young, pre-college, you know, we never finished a game. You know, it was just, you know, we're going to bounce from here to there. We got pretty close with one game, but, you know, that aforementioned friend, you know, who was running a game, he decided to run this really wacky style game where he essentially had one person who was good, one person who was evil, and one person who was in the middle, but most of the time was on the good side. And we were constantly being pitted against each other. And anytime we got the upper hand and I was actually able to kill the evil guy,
shoot,
the dude who was neutral would just bring him back to life. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, that game was, you know, a bit crazy. It wasn't until we actually got to college that I wound up having 2 games that we actually played where the story completed. But prior to that, or you know, alongside of those 2, everything we ran, we did the typical D&D thing. Even if we're gaming regularly, campaigns didn't get finished. You just ran until the DM burned out, or until, you know, somebody decided, oh, well, let me give you a break and let me run this story.
Mm-hmm.
Never go back.
All right, so basically, guys, no matter what, scheduling issues are always going to kill your campaign. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. I do have one thing to say about that, though. Mm-hmm. Our current way that we game is me and Ted game 3 Saturdays a month for the most part, with 3 different groups, and those have been very consistent.
Well, hey,
essentially a once a month game. Mm-hmm. Where you have a session 0 where you basically set what the campaign arc is. Mm-hmm. Our one group I run, it's a 5e game, and you know, I know it's a 12 to 18 session arc. You know, Dave's running a game, you know, it's 5e, it's a 12 to 18 session arc. Then our third group, we're playing not D&D, and we rotate the GMs, and it's everywhere, you know, whatever the GM feels like running, what they feel, you know, is adequate. Dave ran 12-session arc. We had another game that was like a 6-session arc. We're now playing Shadow of the Demon Lord, and that's basically like a 10, 11 sessions like built into the actual game itself.
Yeah.
So like if you can confine a group of players to we're going to do this kind of arc and you buy into that, that does allow for the scheduling to actually see a campaign to a conclusion and buy-in. And if it's once a month, people are usually able to work that into their schedule. But again, Dave and I are the fanatics, and we're in all the groups, and we're just going to play all the games.
I think it definitely is just like, okay, a sort of case where it's like, let's say we're going to play an arc that's going to be roughly 10 sessions, right? It's like, we know that I only have a finite amount of time that this campaign is going to be going on, so I'm going to be a little bit more committed compared to, oh, if I miss a session, well, there's definitely going to be another one next week, or I'm not going to miss too much order because it's going to keep on going and going and going, right?
Yeah, I feel like having things just run on indefinitely. One, it just puts more pressure on the GM, and it also puts less pressure on the players. Like you said, like if you want to be in this game, you've got a finite amount of sessions to be in it. So here's what and also like when you sit down in session 0, you're all agreeing to it, right? You're like, oh, well, I said I would do this thing for this 12 times, this 10 times, whatever.
Yeah, 100% agree. So I had another question for you guys. So would you say, like, was it just overall in general, was it easy to kind of find people to play D&D with? Because it's going to be for a follow-up question. Like, yes or kind of no? What do you guys think?
No. I would say no.
I'm on the other side. I don't know whether, like, there's, like, this, nerd radar that I just give off. But I have always been able to find people to game with throughout all the aspects of my life. So once I got involved, I played with kids and scouts.
Were they like people that knew D&D, or did you have to like kind of teach them?
I was introduced to it by the older kids. And then as I became one of the older kids and they kind of graduated out of scouting, like there were, now this is the dude to look up to. You're making friends, you're doing things. There's always downtime when you go camping. We would go camping every single month. It's not hard to be like, okay, I'm going to throw a book and some dice and some paper into the, what I'm packing. So we would sit there and we would game on camping trips. And like, it was very easy to bring new people into the hobby. Yeah, there's going to be people who don't like it, but I had access to that. Then, as I said, there was, a couple kids in my grade that I would, go game with at their house after school. And then by the time I got out of high school and into college, like there were basically places where the nerds hung out. And maybe not everybody who hung out there were nerds, but I was meeting people who easily were like, oh, I do that too. And like I was involved with several different, essentially groups of people on campus. And like at one point in time, we had like a 10 to 12 player game that, one GM ran. We would do, I want to say it was like, Wednesday nights or Thursday nights or something. And he ran this whole story arc, it was fabulous. I ran a crazy game that like, it was technically D&D because people were making D&D sheets, but like it was run in a far more streamlined, simplified pattern where we only used the D20, characters could come and go from the game. But it was like the first time that I ever had where people were spectating, an RPG. Now, some people were just in the room because that was a hangout spot, but others were like coming literally just to watch us, roll dice and talk in funny voices. But like those games, like I had people that I'd never gamed with before coming up to me like, dude, how can I get in on this game? Sure, why not? Not me. So like, and then after that, like, the game that I put together with Dave at that point in time was already going, and that continued on a weekly basis. And anytime someone was like, oh, off I go, we were just bringing new people in. There's always space at the table, and there was constantly people coming and going, for a decade.
I will say, though, between you leaving college and us starting Nerdarchy it was much more difficult, and we had less of a pool of people to pull from. There's definitely times where there's only like 4 of us at the table, and the groups were much smaller, and we and at that point, like, we would get together a little bit less frequently as well. It wasn't until we started doing Nerdarchy that it was much easier, but to both of those things, like when my brother was still in college and Ted was still in college, it was easier to pull people from those places into the games. I know when we started doing Nerdarchy, we started hanging out a lot more places where more nerdy people were, so it was a lot easier to pull people in as well.
Yeah.
But I think like there's lessons there that people just take into their everyday lives. Like if you're doing something like theater or something that is already like maybe I don't want to say fringe, but maybe not the cool kid thing, but any activity really that you're getting involved with and you've already connected with people, it is easier to pull those people in to a game of D&D than starting from ground zero and just like even with like just your regular friends. Like if you're already doing activities together with a group, it's easier to pull them into different activities, I feel like.
Yeah.
Right, but if there's some kind of tangential connection to an RPG, either acting has the improv capabilities, or like if you're in some kind of fantasy novel reading group, you can absolutely just be like, hey,
let's play D&D.
we got to do this thing here where instead of reading the story, we got to be a part of the story. Is that something you'd be willing to try, or is that something you want to do? Sometimes you have a conversation, and it's possible that 2 to 3 times out of 4 they're going to say no, but that 1 time out of 4 they say sure, let's give this a shot. And there's plenty of people that go to, at this point in time, Barnes and Noble and look at the fantasy novel section, and you can tell that the hobby is growing just by looking at the bookstore, how large a section D&D has, or the TTRPG section has. How much space is at your local comic book store that it's not just shoved off in a corner somewhere. It's got legitimate space. The one store that I go to pseudo locally, like it's got 2 buildings next door to each other. One's for comics, one's for TTRPGs. So it's like you got your pick.
Pretty much. The reason why I asked that is because I deal with a lot of individuals that are like, hey, just in general, like even nowadays, it's like, hey, Sensei, how do I get into D&D or whatever? Maybe I don't have a strong enough computer, or maybe I don't even have a phone, or I don't know, whatever it may be. The point is I want to play D&D like in person, right? And it's always been sort of that sort of thing of like, okay, well, nowadays you guys can just go to your comic book store or your game shop, or even just like maybe if you have like a random club, then sometimes you'll even find a D&D club to get into. Heck, you can even start your own if you really want to. The point is there's many ways on like how to get involved in the hobby. So that's why I was very, very curious on like how it was when it was like first getting started. Now, we talked about scheduling issues, and also, not all the time, even if you, even if you found like a group of individuals to play with, maybe they weren't necessarily the greatest of individuals to play with, but hey, they were what you had at the time, so you kind of either had to make it work or you just really didn't play D&D, right? So
there was a lot of that.
Dave, if you want to take it away, you sound like, because I remember you were saying something.
So now it is a lot easier to try and look for groups that mesh with you and the personality of the group. But back when we used to play, you kind of took whoever at the table, and you'd have to hammer out the personality issues that would come up as they came up, because there wasn't as many people. I mean, we've had full-on brawls break out at the table. So it was definitely a lot easier. It's a lot easier now because there is a lot more options. You can find D&D meetups. You can go to different comic book stores or gaming stores. I know my brother Ryan, his thing, when he would move into a new area, is he would go to gaming stores to look for games to start a home group from. instead of playing, like an Adventures League or something of that nature, or Pathfinder Society. He wanted to play our home group, so he would basically use those places as like hunting grounds. I know one time he put together a group from a Craigslist ad, essentially.
Hey, do what you gotta do. Do what you gotta do.
It's gonna be real sketchy one way or another. You're gonna play some D&D. I don't know. We definitely ended up with one guy in our group from there for a while, and he would travel far, and we were never sure if we were gonna end up chained up in that guy's basement at some point or not.
Ted, you're trying to say something?
Yeah, and like, yeah, you don't necessarily have to have a huge, computer, but like if you go onto Discord, a lot of different, nerdy, things have an area for LFG, looking for a group.
Yeah.
And you might find people that are only looking at, gaming online, but you never know when it's like the number of times that Dave had somebody come on to the live chat and it's like, oh, you happen to be in South Jersey? Holy crap. We should, we should meet up and talk in real life and what have you. And a couple of those people, like, we now game with regularly, and like that is awesome to have an off-air, non-streamed game where we get to just, be ourselves and not have to worry about performing for a camera or monitoring what is said. Like, oh, that needs to be edited out because that was very much off color or inappropriate for for YouTube. And we as gamers know that's going to happen every so often, if not every session. But there's so many ways to make connections nowadays that just didn't exist back then. And whatever method works for you, go for it. If this one doesn't work, try another. I'm certain you're going to find something and find people to game with.
We found several players from a very unlikely activity, and that was Yo-Yo Club, right? Yo-Yo Club produced several players that we've played with on and off with for over the years. And I will say, just putting yourself out there and doing kind of events and activities that are kind of nerdy, you're just going to meet more people, and you're just going to have more people in your life, and you'll find you'll have more common interests. And I think we were doing the Yo-Yo Club thing, and I think I was wearing a Cthulhu shirt, and one of the folks that was there was like, "Hey, I really like Cthulhu. It's one of my favorite RPGs. Do you guys play RPGs?" And we're kind of like, "Well, it's funny you mention that." So it's like going to conventions, going to other nerdy activities and getting involved with other people. That's literally the best way to find a group, right? Just meeting people and, getting out there.
Yeah. And as Dave says, if you wear something that kind of just proudly proclaims, hey, I do nerdy things. If somebody else is already a little bit more outgoing, they might approach you. But don't be afraid to start a conversation. If you happen to see someone wearing a comic shirt or a Lord of the Rings shirt, have a conversation. And it may or may not lead to someone joining your group. They might ask you to join their group, or or not. You never know. But it's something that finding people to connect with. You never know who's going to be out there, and the people that. We kind of mentioned that gaming needs to develop a connection, but like the people you roll dice with are the people that you should care about and form that connection with, and some of those people are going to turn out to be your best friends for life.
Yeah, so Ted has always been very openly nerd, but like me and like my friend group have been very, very closeted nerds for the most part. So like we've talked about like wearing like nerdy apparel as a way to like
be like,
kind
hey,
of
I'm a nerd, but I'm not gonna say it or openly say it, but only other nerds will get it, right?
You see someone wearing a Starscream shirt, right, back in the day, you're like, oh, I see like Transformers, right? And then you're like very slyly being like, hey, yo, do you know where you can score some D20, man? And then
oh my goodness!
It's like you're playing D&D used to be like Fight Club. The first rule about playing D&D is you don't talk about D&D.
Yeah,
and I was absolutely the other way around. I mean, I was threatened with physical violence That aforementioned group that we put together shortly after Dave, Dave put that group together. My one friend and I, we joined a LARP. We did it for a number of years, and we got to the friend's house, and I don't know whether we were waiting for pizza to show up, or what was
we were
happening.
waiting for him to get home from work.
But we weren't gaming yet. And so we drove there. So my buddy and I, we pull out our boffer swords, little, PVC coated in foam and duct tape, and we're having a grand old time swinging away at each other on his front lawn. And he comes up and he's like, "Dude, I will kick your ass if you ever do that."
Yeah,
put that nerd crap away.
So first of all, it's like an apartment complex, right?
Okay.
So everything's very close together, and they're going at it with their LARP weapons, and
inevitably other people are gonna see, bro.
yeah. And our other buddy pulls up. He's like, "I will beat the ever living dog crap out of you guys if I ever see this again." It was a different era. It was a different time.
Oh man. Oh
goodness. That was the thing. Like Dave, and I'll steal his story. Like when they were younger, when they talked about gaming, they would talk about rocking out. If I was going to talk about gaming, it's like we're gonna go game, gonna go play D&D. Like we didn't hide anything.
Yeah.
I did all the nerdy stuff, and it is what it is.
Actually, I have one final question, kind of like on this sort of topic. So. We talked a little bit, just very briefly about like, okay, so here's all the sort of things of like that kind of went into D&D, especially like earlier back in the day. And then there were some pitfalls, but there also were a lot of sort of benefits of being able to play like back in that sort of age. But if you could probably chalk it up to one or two, a couple of things, when you have like such a small range of people to play with most of the time, it's kind of like, okay, whoever's in your city, whoever's in your direct area or that you probably come in contact with, or whether you're going to different events, these are the people that you're playing with, compared to like nowadays. Oh, I'm playing with my friend Finn from Ireland, or I'm playing with or another person from literally Algeria or whatever, right? How do you think that D&D kind of survived over the decades through to a lot of pitfalls that it had going against it? And there are plenty of them. So how do you think like D&D kind of, and TTRPGs in general, survived over the decades?
I will say that RPGs and D&D, and you can see this in D&D now more than anything, it's like Harley Davidson, right? It's become a lifestyle brand more than just a game. Like how many people are like watching Critical Role and maybe even repping Critical Role and even D&D to a certain extent, yet they never even play the game, right? Whereas, when we came up, you came up through playing the game, and it just got into your D&D. It was our way to be creative. It was our way to, maybe have some power over our lives that you otherwise wouldn't have. A way to control things and become a hero of your own story. And I feel like once you got that bug, it just sticks. And it's what I attribute to like the popularity now, because it's like, us folks that were playing it as kids are now adults and still playing it, and also like we have our kids playing it now, maybe even grandkids playing it now.
Yeah.
So so it has its own culture that built up around it, that even if it stayed a small culture for a long time, it was still a very tight-knit culture. You can go anywhere in the world where there are other people that play TTRPGs, and you can instantly form a bond with those people and begin talking to them like they were lifelong friends, because you have this shared interest, you have this shared language. Once either of you start speaking, you're just going to connect, and intrinsically you're going to know what each other is talking about, even though you've never actually played the game together.
It's a scenario that, like, there are, I would say a testament to the people who kept the game going and didn't give it up despite scheduling conflicts, the satanic panic, despite workship or work or financial issues. people who have decided I'm going to keep playing this game, it has survived and now it's thrived. Dave brought up, Critical Role, but it's, there's plenty of other streams that are out there now that, people watch religiously. When I look at some of these, more popular streams and the numbers of viewers in just a short amount of hours since it launched, it blows me away. And, again, some of those people watching, they don't play the game, and they don't have to. I'm not gonna, criticize or say anything negative in any way, shape, or form. If it does anything tangentially to promote the hobby, I'm all here for it. It doesn't have to be just D&D. RPG or TTRPGs of all sort, are awesome, and I'm happy to see that new ones keep coming out, and there's plenty of them. And you can look at the the books behind me here. They're not all just D&D, and they're not all specifically 5e. There's so many great things that are out there. So if you have the slightest interest in checking out any TTRPG, I am certain that there is a game specific to what you're looking for, or a generic system that can easily run that game. You just have to find the people to play with and make it happen.
I don't even think you need to find a generic system. Almost like there's some games are so niche. Ted says something really important and kind of like dovetailing off the fact that I had mentioned there's a bunch of people that watch the game that never really played the game, and there's a certain segment of our community that this seems to really anger for some reason. And I want to say those people have always been in the community. There's always been the spectator in the D&D community. They may have appeared in a different way. Like, going back as long as I can remember, there's always been the spouse of the gamer at the table.
That's what I was going to say, yep.
That has come to, just to spend time with their significant other. They're not really into the game, but they're kind of there, but that's fine, because to me, it's all about just exposure. Like, they're getting exposed to the game, and it may not stick this time, and that's fine. But like the next time they're exposed to it, it might hit them in a different way. There's a pretty popular vlogger on YouTube. I think it's TJ1. And my brother had sent me a video of his and said, "Hey, you should have this guy on the live chat." And so I reached out and I had him on, and he talked about like kind of being interested in D&D, but he saw Critical Role and he was like, it was okay, but it didn't really do anything for me. But it wasn't until that he said he saw Dimension 20, and he's like, I saw people playing the game that looked like me, and then that really made me want to play. And I got together with my brother and my other friends who have never played the game before, and we made our own group. Right. So like there's so many instances where like D&D or RPGs may bounce off of somebody, once, twice, thrice, whatever, but if for whatever reason that one time it hits them just right, and then we got another member in the community playing the games.
Awesome.
And ultimately that's what we're looking for. Obviously it's not going to register, it's not going to be for everyone, but if it hits with you, if you make a connection, again, going to what we said before, that shared interest, that shared story that you're having is just awesome. And the number of times that I've had conversations with people the day after or like immediately after that the session was just so fun and so impactful that it's like, yeah, you could go and sit and watch somebody else's story, or you can make your own. What would you rather do?
Right. And I was kind of, I fell into sort of the department where it's like, I'm not going to necessarily watch somebody else's story, you know what? But I like the idea, I like the concept of it. Let's grab a couple of friends, let's do this ourselves, let's make something together, right? But yeah, I love it. I love the whole sort of thing with, there's just so many different ways to get into D&D, whether you actually like have that person that's like, hey, let's just go play it, versus, hey, we're just looking on Twitch or whatever, twitch.tv, and a bunch of people are playing this weird wacky game where you're rolling dice, many ways, especially nowadays. But that being said, I do want to say, Also, real quick, a little call to action. Hey guys, if you guys are enjoying the talk so far, if you enjoyed it, whether you had a little bit of a laugh, do make sure to please go check out Nerdarchy's channel. I just dropped the link over in the YouTube and Twitch chats over there. Go drop them a subscription, go check out their content, and go see if that type of stuff is the stuff that you'd like. And remember, only subscribe if this is this type of content that you really want to thoroughly enjoy. Don't just subscribe to their channel and just be a dead sub. No one wants a dead sub, right? So that being said, again, make sure to like the video and all that good stuff.
Undead sub, that might be another thing.
That might be another thing. Can I like raise dead subs to like hit the like button? Is that a thing I can do? Like, oh. Oh man. But let's get into the next segment for everything. So, hey, chat. What if I told you that you, yes you, anybody, could possibly make a career by rolling dice, laughing with friends, and making creative videos for thousands, if not millions, of people to enjoy? Well, I'd say that if that would be the case, I'd be probably living the dream. However, we do have two individuals on the panel who have turned said dream into a reality, as we have the likes of, obviously, Nerdarchy as our sort of panel guests, here to explain their content creation journey. So, Nerdarchy Ted, Nerdarchy Dave, you gave us a little bit of an idea of like how you kind of all got started into D&D and how it was sort of as it progressed throughout the years. But what in the hell possessed you guys to start recording talking about D&D? See, like, I guess in the current age, like I grew up around people who were, you know, always making videos, always making content in general, by the time I was like 6 or whatever, right? So the concept of filming doing what you love, that's a pretty common scenario. But I obviously, you guys being a lot more older than me, what made you to want to get started recording stuff, and then let alone start recording talks about D&D specifically? Let's talk about that.
He's talking to you, Dave, because you said a lot more older than him.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
So
you don't understand how young I am. You don't understand.
No, Ted, he's David's age.
Wow.
Yeah.
David's my son.
I'm a wee
true. Sensei could be my son.
Yeah. Nah, I just like messing with you guys. I hope you know it's all jokes.
No insult taken. I just know that Dave is old.
You grew up in the 80s. There's like nothing you can say.
Oh man.
No, so it's funny. The funny story, because actually, I want to say two people that are not currently involved with Nerdarchy probably played the greatest hand in creating Nerdarchy.
Really?
One is kind of like a friend and mentor to me on all things internet, and he's the one, he for years was telling me, he's like, you should do something with D&D online, you could turn this hobby of yours into a business. And I'm like, I don't know, I don't think so, nobody's going to care about that. And then my brother was moving back from New Mexico to the Philadelphia area, which is kind of local to us. And he's like, hey, we should do something. I want to start something, maybe like an indie board game blog or something. Because I had done some blogging stuff in the past. And I was like, I don't know about indie board games, but, maybe we could start off and do something, really like generic for, nerdy stuff. I mean, D&D was like more of the thing that I was into. And I was like, we should team up with Ted. Like, I knew from different things I've done in the past that like it would be important to build a team to work with. And, so we connected with Ted and we started like looking around and researching. And I want to say there was 2 channels that we kind of looked at first that kind of gave us the inkling that this could really be a thing. So, Dawnforge Cast, Andrew Armstrong had a channel all about Pathfinder, and it's not even around anymore. But like he was fairly successful. He had like, I don't know, 10,000, 20,000 subscribers at the time. I think it was like 20,000. And then there was Noah Atweiler Spoonie, had a channel called Counter Monkey, which was very specifically about RPGs and just kind of like telling his old stories. The name of the channel came from they would call the people that would hang out and like share their RPG stories with them, whether they wanted to hear them or not. Counter monkeys. So he had like 33,000 subscribers. So I was like, I guess there's a thing here. So when like Ted already kind of alluded to, like we started off very generic, and then we started like working our way more towards TTRPG. Because I mean, for me, that's more of where my passion was at, personally. And and then we weren't that long into Nerdarchy when 5e dropped, and like the timing was perfect. It was literally a 4th of July weekend in 2014, and I don't the basic rules dropped for 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, the free rules, and I was like, guys, we should take a look at this. And we, did a video about 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. And, from there, our channel just kind of started taking off. We really liked the rule set. It really jived with us because, as you alluded to, we're kind of old and played through, pretty much all the editions. So 5e to us was just like an amalgamation of everything that I've always, enjoyed through the different editions of D&D, put into one place. So that was really like the springboard for our channel. Now, I've been working the business full time for the last few years. Ted is an owner, but he has not been working the business. But within, I think at the end of 2019, we hired a full-time employee that's been with us, Nerditor Doug, who's been a godsend to the channel and everything we do on the website. So it's been super cool.
Oh, no. Yeah, it was just Ted didn't have audio, so I'm talking to him, making sure that.
I know. I'm sorry if you go. Because I'm like seeing that stuff as well.
Nah, you're fine.
But yeah, so like it was through, so that was kind of the evolution all the way up to 2019 when we launched our first Kickstarter for Out of the Box Encounters, which was very successful. We launched our second Kickstarter at the beginning of this year, which did okay. We funded it. We did like 40K, and now we're looking to do our own RPG with Zoo Mafia. And one of the things we wanted to do and started doing that kind of fell apart for us was we were going to do Nerdarchy the convention, and we're still hoping to get that together at some time in the future. But, yeah, well, here's the thing. Mm-hmm. We had a very successful Kickstarter 2019, and we're like, we want to celebrate next year with a convention.
Okay. Oh, what? 2019. Oh, yeah. All right. There it is.
We started a second company. We started funneling money towards that, and it was just a total S show from there on out, as you can imagine.
Oh my God, yeah. I could imagine. So, like, are you still having, like, you mentioned it, are you still having plans on doing that in the future, or not?
Yeah, we still want to do it in the future. We're still recovering from that a bit. So Ted, you didn't hear anything I said, right?
It might be muted. Let me see. Nah, I don't think you can hear you. Nah. Oh man.
You guys just get to look at Ted's pretty face from here on. But yeah, so like, and Nerdarchy has kind of contracted and grown over the years. Like when we first started out, it was me, Ryan, Ted. We brought Nate in, and then eventually Nate dropped, Ryan dropped, because it turns out running a business and also having other things going on in your life is very hard.
Mm-hmm.
And Nerdarchy's only really been successful enough to provide for two people at one time so far, at various levels. So that being said, it's been a great experience, and we've definitely had some really cool moments along the way, and we just keep on trying to grow and improve. And one of the fun things that we've really enjoyed is being able to give back to the community and actually hire people to do this stuff. We've employed tons of freelancers over the years.
Yeah. So correct me if I'm wrong, but explain this sort of one thing because you mentioned it. You very, very briefly sort of mentioned at the whole beginning of everything. So you guys let's kind of run through the journey, whatever, of like Nerdarchy and how this sort of thing got started, right? So eventually you had your sort of friend, and they mentioned like, hey, maybe you can sort of do this whole D&D sort of thing, make money, blah 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 blah, all that stuff, and you're kind of like, maybe kind of whatever, right? So what was the deciding factor of like, okay, I actually do want to start making YouTube videos? And then on top of that, why'd you start making it with Ted, or was it Ted's idea? Like, how'd that sort of thing go?
Okay, so my buddy had been in my ear for a while, and then my brother Ryan was moving back from New Mexico to the area, and he wanted to do something.
Gotcha.
I had done some blogging before, and we basically used YouTube as research, and they were like, oh, we can do this.
Yeah, and then that's how... Yeah.
And that's how we started with YouTube. And we also started with the website at the same time, all the social media as well. Because one of the things, too, I will say, like, this is a lesson that everyone needs to learn if you're going to do this kind of stuff, is to understand that Patreon, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, you don't own any of these platforms. You are a leasee without a lease. And at any time when they tell you they're done with you, they are done with you. You don't get a say in the matter. That's why we started our own website at the same time. We wanted to always like have a rally point and have something, stake out a piece of the internet that's ours, and no one can tell us, what to do with it, how to use it. These are just things that people need to keep in mind. Like, whenever there's a monetization thing on YouTube, everyone gets angry and they get upset. But you need to understand that that's not only can that happen, it is going to happen. It's probably going to happen several times. The first adpocalypse we experienced was after I went full time. Right? Like, I quit my job. We had our best 3 years, the best 3 months in a row ever, and it seemed pretty consistent. And then we experienced our first adpocalypse. And so these things are going to happen, and you have to understand they're going to happen and be ready for them when they are, right? So that's why we also make products. That's why we wanted to do events, and diversify. That's why we're working on our own RPG. That one was a little bit harder to come by, but eventually we got there. Because for years people were like, "Are you going to do your own RPG?" We're like, "Nah, why would we do that? There's lots of great ones out there."
Exactly.
But it's funny because we were like in a team meeting, and someone misheard something, and they're like, "I know you didn't say this,
but I heard Zoo Mafia," and it's like, wait a second, what the heck? And as soon as Dave heard, our friends say Zoo Mafia, he was hooked. He's like, this has to be a thing. And, we did some research, or it's primarily been Dave, did the research to find out.
Wait, so
okay.
Hold on. I don't mean to cut you off. So you're telling me, like, Zoo Mafia, like, the concept of it got created literally by just someone mishearing something?
Yes, 100%.
That is amazing.
Yes.
And here we are many months later, with us having 6 sessions up online for our, it's not even beta, it's absolutely an alpha. But we want to make this game, we want to make it happen, we want to get it shared out there, go wild and do crime. But going back to the point about the evolution of this process, like it was absolutely a catalyst of Dave and Ryan talking, Dave saying like if you're going to do something, and we absolutely approached this as a business, and the plan was we want this to be a business that can grow, support us, do all of these things, to have a team. And as I've said many times over the course of my life about how big of a nerd I am, it's like, okay, I get passionate about the things that I care about. So sure, it's easy to say, let's talk about nerdy things, and then, oh, we want to double down on your favorite role-playing game and devote this channel to 5th edition. I'm here for it. I'm okay with that aspect, because that's what we started talking about, and it brought people in, and that's what the people that were watching wanted us to talk about. So we could talk about all kind of things nerdy, but if they're watching the D&D things, let's talk about the D&D things then.
Makes sense, right? Makes sense. So we do have actually a bit of content creators probably in the likes of the stream on both end, and probably even just watching the VOD or video of this. So I always bring this up, that it's very rare that every content creation path is filled with, you know, like sunshine and roses, right? What were probably, if you want to go into that, what were probably your biggest struggles when it came to getting started on this path? Whether it was just like, you know, first starting to record videos, or maybe it's further down the line. What were kind of your struggles when it came to this?
Being morons. So like when we came into this, we didn't know how to do any of this stuff really. Like I learned about SEO and some blogging stuff, but I'm not a particularly strong writer. Creative, yes, maybe, but not a particularly strong writer. And also, we knew nothing about content creation when it came to video editing, shooting videos. We started with an iPhone and an external mic, and you know, we just kept trying to get better as we went along. And I feel like now coming into the D&D space, it is a lot harder. The bar is much higher than when we started. You know, now, you know, and especially too, like the younger guys that are coming up, like yourself, like you literally grew up in the platform, like, and you intuitively will understand this platform in a way me and Ted never will. Where you know, whereas our kids may even, you know, understand it even more deeply than you do, right? Because you know, it's just at a certain point, it's like intrinsically in the DNA of doing that. So you know, so for us, it was like the struggles were always just like learning as we go along, figuring out our voice. You know, one of the things that we kind of, I personally grapple with, especially now, is, you know, I'm always concerned that our fans see that we appear a certain way, so they assume we're a certain way. And like one of my biggest fears is meeting the fans and realizing maybe I don't like them so much. And we have encountered a little bit of that over the years. You know, like, you know, we did one video about diversity, and we literally had a neo-Nazi show up. Like send like all their fans. There was like, I ended up taking that video down just because the comments were so bad. But I had left it up for months out of principle. And like the one that will always stick out to me is the comment that says, I really want to dislike this video, but there's already 666 dislikes on it. Oh my gosh. So there's always going to be struggles and trials and tribulations as you go through it. And sometimes you know, you might even just make missteps along the way, and you have to just course correct and figure it out. But like one of the hard things too is just like finding your voice. For us, that was kind of easy early on because the audience picked it for us. They're like, we really just want you to talk about 5e D&D. So we're like, oh, okay, we like that too, so we can talk about that.
Right.
You know, and then you've got the aspect of, you know, the other side of your voice of, you know, what are you going to do when you turn that camera on? And I know that there are people who get into this content creation stuff and they decide, you know what, I'm going to do this. And they create, you know, a different voice or a dialed up personality. And like, that's all great and good, you know, if that's what you're okay with. But if you're going to go out and never meet people, like, are you prepared to turn that on at a moment's notice? I don't want to have to do that. So, you know, when we sit there and we turn the camera on, what you see is what you get. You know, the personalities on camera, we're as passionate as you think, and that's who we are in a day-to-day matter. I mean, I've had people at a convention, like a small convention, just be walking in front of me, and they literally turned around and like, are you from Nerdarchy? I don't know which one you are, but I recognize your voice. You know, and I'm like, wow, that means that person's watched an awful lot of our videos.
Ted, you brought up a really good point that I don't even know if you wholly realize it, but whatever persona you choose for your online persona, make sure you really like that persona.
Yeah,
because I won't mention the creator only because they've told this story before, but the Angry GM has a whole shtick about being the Angry GM.
Yeah.
Right? And he's talked about in podcasts where in hindsight, maybe he wouldn't have gone that route. But once you've done that for so many years, that's who you are.
You kind of just can't rebrand or change it. It's just like, oh, well, here we are.
So that's the thing to look at, is if you're going to get into content creation and you're going to have, whether it be a voice or visual and voice, you've got to own it. You've got to be whatever that's going to be, because once you built your shtick, that's it. That's what you got to stick with.
Let's face it. When Puffin Forrest shows up, and he's not that little round figure with that are just shaped, how angry people are.
No. It's like,
he's a jolly giant.
I've
met Ben in real life, and
okay.
Oh my, is he tall?
Oh man, that's actually interesting. So on that sort of note, again, sort of going into that, Dave, we mentioned kind of a little bit of your struggles or whatever, the things that you guys kind of encountered, that you sort of mentioned. Ted, was there any sort of other struggles that you kind of ran into when it came to the likes of content creation in general?
So for me as a content creator, there is the struggle on a daily, weekly basis of, what is it that the audience wants us to talk about? What things are going to, literally connect with the people who are, for lack of a better word, your fans, your customers, if you will. Yeah. We want to make them happy. We want to be producing content that they want to watch, that they want to listen to, that they want to read. We have regular meetings, here, like a typical business of okay, let's talk about this and video plan that. And when we first started, we just draft up an idea. Okay, we're gonna talk about insert whatever. We turn the camera on and we just start talking. There was no figured out flow. There was no, what is our opening? What is our closing? How does this work? There was, the original filming area is right over there, and the 4 chairs were sat across, and we would just turn the camera on. Sometimes we'd go for 45 minutes, and it's like, dear God, how much of that was just complete and utter rambling that Dave would then have to take home and edit and cut crap out, or just be like, nope, insert the beginning, insert the ending, and there we go, we've got a video. And now there's so much work that goes on behind the scenes, to make that be a little bit more streamlined. And, the number of times that Dave's tapped the table, Ted, back on script, you're jumping ahead of the cuff. I'm like, crap. We do this for a reason, because it makes the videos flow better. It makes the content, better. And when you do things in a, legit order that makes sense, it makes it enjoyable overall.
We used to do a lot more content. We were putting out 2 videos a day plus the live stream a day. So
that's basically 3 pieces of content daily. Holy crap.
Yeah. So, and sometimes we'd only film it on one day. So we'd end up having to shoot so 10 would be the goal, but then you always do 1 or 2 more just so you're kind of getting ahead. Yeah. Right. And after you do that all day on a Saturday, it would be either the 3 of us or the 4 of us. By the end, I just wanted to put a shotgun in my mouth and pull the trigger with my toe. It's just so brutal.
Because then some of those days, we would film and then game thereafter.
Yeah. Look, I've done heavy construction. I've done different types of construction. I've run a 90-pound jackhammer for 8 hours. It's, and I'll tell you what, just doing the mental and emotional drain of shooting videos for 6-8 hours straight nonstop, I found way more draining than that physical manual labor.
So actually,
100%.
So like actually on that note, because I am well, I don't know exactly. For your case, it might have been different. You guys didn't start off with. Did you have like a dedicated editor, or did you just kind of have to figure it out yourselves?
We figured it out ourselves.
We started with Dave, and once the channel actually began earning enough money to support it, we brought in we pay an editor to make that happen.
Yeah,
and Dave is much happier about that.
So like
nothing fills you with self-loathing like editing your own face and voice over and over again. My wife would like walk in on me. My wife would walk in on me and be like, and she'd hear me, "Shut up, Ted! Shut up, Dave! You're so stupid, the two of you, amoebas. How did you ever crawl out of the primordial sludge?"
So actually, on that note, so like you guys are having to do everything yourselves, especially like starting off, until eventually you get to that point where you're able to like hire people to kind of take the load off of you guys. Did you ever just kind of like want to call it quits when it came to this sort of whole thing? Like, what did you want to call it quits? And if not, what kept you guys kind of motivated to keep going and keep making content?
I think every creator has those moments at some point or another where they're like, is this too much? Maybe I just want to go back to enjoying the hobby. And there's always the trouble of the trap of, are you trying to turn everything you do into content? Which I highly recommend you don't. Like, figure out a way to make sure you keep some of the hobby still just the hobby. It's one of the reasons we stopped recording our home games and putting them on the internet. But ultimately, we really do like what we do. One of the things that has helped us be successful is, like, we were already doing this kind of, right? Like, sitting on the phone for hours talking to Ted about D&D used to happen on a weekly basis anyway, or other people on a weekly basis anyways. Now we just do it in front of the camera.
Yeah. There were many times that my sister would jibe at me or at Dave of like, guys, you guys are talking on the phone like freaking teenage girls. What the flip? So yeah, it is ridiculous that we did have these conversations, and if you're gonna have it, why not turn on the camera and put it up on YouTube and share your views out there? Somebody might find it interesting. Somebody might be able to get something out of it. Were there times that you want to pull the plug and walk away? I mean, like Dave says, there's always going to be negativity. There's always going to be well, crap, that was a bit of a mistake. Maybe that shouldn't have been said, or that shouldn't have been done. And if something were to happen and Nerdarchy were to disappear today, tomorrow, it's something that I'm thankful for what we've done. But more importantly, I am like super thankful for the connections that I've made and the friends that have happened because of Nerdarchy. The different things that I've gotten the ability to do, the different people that I now consider to some of the best friends, so some of my best friends are all because we started this, this hobby, or because we started this channel. It's a scenario that I game with people. I have gamed with people from around the world. We have gone out to England to play D&D in a castle, and Dave and I are getting to do it again, this September. And, it's something that not everybody's going to get those kind of opportunities. So you know what? Yeah, if it stopped, if it's over, I'm super happy it happened. But am I willing to give it up right now? No, there's still a lot of things that I would like to do and like to see if, can we make this happen and can we make that happen? There's more plans behind, the curtains than, we could really accomplish in the next several years. So, yeah, we're not done.
Yeah, I mean, both me and Ted have put Nerdarchy tattoos on our bodies at this point. Because of Nerdarchy, we did a Comic-Con cruise at sea where we actually played D&D on sea in the ocean.
That'd be cool. Please tell
we
me it
did
was
that.
a nautical adventure. Please tell me it was like
It
something.
was
yeah.
a nautical adventure.
Perfect.
I believe that was back in 2016.
Oh, shit, okay.
2017 Fantasy Cruise. I ran a nautical adventure in international waters. It was awesome.
Yeah, and we got to go to Mexico. Me and my family almost got left in Mexico on that same cruise. We went out to LA and we were on GM tips with Satine Phoenix.
Yeah, I think you did you mention that? No, you didn't mention that actually. I was thinking to somebody else.
We, I've been to Origins and Gen Con and PAX Unplugged and Gamehole Con, which I probably wouldn't have went to any of those things had it not been for Nerdarchy.
Yeah.
Ted mentioned, D&D in a Castle the very first year. They were short a player, and I was like, you guys need a Z-list player. And they brought me on at a super discount to play in a game in France. And then, from that, we kind of finagled getting our own castle for us to run groups in the following year in the UK, and then they're not doing it that way anymore. So that was the only year. So and only the people that had castles that year for D&D in the Castle got the headline a castle. So that was really cool. We're going to be GMs in September. It's round 5.
Yeah.
I believe it's the third week in September.
I believe it's the 14th to the 18th, but
Yeah, the 14th to the 18th, and we still have spots open. If you want to play D&D in a castle with us, it's an awesome luxury vacation. So, we've gotten to do these really cool things. And if Nerdarchy went away tomorrow, I'd be really happy with the time we spent there. Like I even and Ted took part in too. I created a second company with another creator called Saver Dice, and the concept was watch your favorite YouTube creators play TTRPGs together. We did that for several years. It was a successful endeavor. I was happy to have done that. Matter of fact, one of my next tattoos will probably be that, because a logo that we didn't use, a friend of mine created that has passed away. So at some point I want to get that put on my body someplace. Just because it's like to commemorate a cool time I had with that group of people. So like all of these things came into our lives, because of, Nerdarchy, and not to mention like the countless number of like friends we made.
Exactly. I always say like a huge thing that sort of keeps me going when it comes to content creation is kind of like what you both were saying again, is just remembering all the sort of good times, remembering all the sort of triumphs and the things that you've been able to do because you started on this sort of journey, right? That like all the memories that you've made, all the friendships that you sort of formed, it keeps on motivating you of like, hey, yeah, I should keep going or whatever. I want more of this. But also at the same time, I love how you guys sort of put it. Hey, if it ended, I'm still happy with what I was able to accomplish and do over that entire course. These friendships, these connections, these experiences, they're pretty much priceless at this point, right? It's amazing, amazing, amazing stuff. So actually, real quick, so we talked about all your content creation stuff, but I don't think we ever mentioned, so if you guys can real quickly give just like a 1 minute quick elevator pitch of what the heck you guys actually do, what would it be? What would it be? What is Nerdarchy? Like, somebody just joined into the stream, right? What do you guys do?
All right, so Nerdarchy is by nerds for nerds. It is us talking about D&D and other TTRPGs, both on on YouTube and our website, and we also create products for tabletop role-playing games. Right now, it's heavily focused on 5e, but we're starting to branch out and do other things. In a nutshell, I would say that's what Nerdarchy is.
Heck yeah, and again, everybody, make sure to go check out their channel. Make sure to go subscribe. Go check out all the content, all the videos that they produce out. Go do it when you get a chance to, because again, I've been watching Nerdarchy for a long while, since I pretty much started playing D&D in the first place. Go check them out. They might be the next content creator for you to start digesting and all that stuff. So
yeah, I think we're closing in on like 4,000 videos at this point.
God damn. What?
Yeah, we've done a lot.
All right, well, this is inaccurate. Well, you need to freaking update your description, because it's saying, oh yeah, we've made over 1,000 gaming related video. You might want to start changing that to 4,000. Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
Actually,
we've got
good.
Over on the nerdarchy.com. Taking pre-orders for the last Kickstarter that we did, which is 250 Tyro-sized magic item cards. That was definitely a lot of fun to put together, and I art directed and had a lot of fun with that.
Yeah, heck yeah. So real quick, as we're sort of wrapping up this segment, we have a very, very quick sort of thing. We're gonna move on to a little bit of a short rapid fire Q&A session here with the likes of you guys. And I pretty much, as I mentioned before, I've taken questions across from all the platforms from D&D, or for D&D, and pretty much gathered specific questions from like YouTube, Twitter, Discord, TikTok, all that sort of stuff. And I try to get some of the best ones here. So, hey, you guys ready to answer some questions?
Let's go for it.
Fire away.
All right, so we can do this one. Actually, here I'm gonna do like a back and forth sort of thing. So Ted, you're gonna answer this one. So
right.
This is from a good friend of mine, Night Raven. She asked, "Hey, Nerdarchy Ted, what is your favorite edition of D&D, and what makes that one so special?"
That's super easy. 5th edition, I feel, brings the best of all previous editions. Right now, I feel like we've got the most versatility with the best streamlined set of rules, and it's easy enough to homebrew to make whatever modifications you feel it's missing, lacking, or needs adjusting. So I've made the most amount of content, homebrew stuff for 5th edition, and I feel it's the easiest to have done so.
Heck yeah. And actually, we can throw this over to Dave as well, because I got the second question, you'll see. But go ahead, Dave. What would be your favorite D&D edition, and why?
I would literally just mirror everything Ted said. Like 5e taught me what I missed from going from 2nd to 3rd. And so it took another couple editions for that to catch up to me. So it is an amalgamation of all the editions, and they managed to grab all the best parts. The only thing they missed was minions from 4e and maybe Residium. But other than that, 5e, but hands down.
Heck yeah.
I've used Residuum in my games, and you've used minions in your game. So, like I said, being able to easily bring whatever aspect you feel is missing is easy enough within 5e to just make happen.
Heck yeah. So this one's a funny one. So Showcase 25, they say over from Discord, and this is actually to both of you. So Nerdarchy, Dave, and Ted, who has been growing out their beard the longest? Who's it been?
I'm older, so me.
So Dave's beard, is definitely, fuller and could be longer, but he trims his, whereas mine, I just kind of let it do its thing. And I had just the goatee for the longest time, and for whatever reason, so many people grew the COVID beard, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to get in on that too. So I let the sides grow out, and I've just been kind of enjoying it and haven't shaved it. So I'm here for it.
Heck yeah.
I'm just waiting for it to get a little bit longer so I can do like the dwarven braids.
Yes, I was like, please tell me you're going to braid it.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
I've experimented with it, but it's not quite where I want it. But that's definitely the plan.
Heck yeah. All right, we got the next question over here from a good friend of mine, Animus. So this is a big one. So this is actually to both of you. We're gonna shoot over to let's shoot over to Dave for this one. All right, so Dave, what are your thoughts on the current state of Dungeons and Dragons? What are some things, if any, that you would like to see implemented in future modules and updates?
So one of the things I would like to see them use more is when 5e was first announced, they talked about it being very modular, and then they totally went away from that. Like, I would like to see the inspiration used for more things. Like, we're probably going to put together some products where we actually do that, because they won't or haven't. They're starting to do it a little bit, but we would love to, they've waited way too long to incorporate more things with the hit dice. We actually have a whole product, Heroics the Hit Dice, where we give other uses for hit dice, and it feels like a very underutilized resource in 5e. And just like they do it in some of the games, like like Mythic Odysseys of Theros, where they're like, hey, here's another power set you can just add to your character.
Yeah.
And that's I like that kind of stuff where it's like you're playing it, or now you're playing in Dragonlance, so you can pick one of these overpowered backgrounds, or instead get one of these feats instead. I kind of like that stuff where it's very specific, where you can see where I completely think they botched Strixhaven in that one regards with their backgrounds. They could have just made it a separate thing where instead of connecting it to backgrounds, it's like you can just choose to be part of a college or something, instead of going, nah, all the other backgrounds are worthless now.
Yeah, kind of like when you were talking about Theros, like the supernatural gifts and all that stuff.
Yeah.
All right, so the next one, or next little rapid fire question we got, this is actually one for everybody. What has been the most comical homebrew subclass or race that you have come across, whether it be 5th edition or just in general? Ted, if you want to start us off.
The most comical race or subclass? That's a bit difficult. I mean, basically anything on D&D Wiki. I mean, is that too hateful?
I mean, we can go in the direction of very comical, but yet balanced with the Beardomancer.
The Beardomancer. Someone actually just said that Beardomancer in chat.
Yeah,
I don't know if you paid him off or something, but
we do have a homebrew wizard tradition called Beardomancy magic, and that stemmed from Dave's dyeing his beard for a little while, and when we would film videos, we wouldn't necessarily put them up in the same order. So this video on Monday, he'd have a stark white beard, then it would be, bright red on Wednesday, and then back to stark white on Friday, and people got to asking different lengths, as the case may be as well. So like people started asking questions, and Dave was like, "Oh, it's just Beardomancy," and he just left it at that. So the 1 year, a few years ago, we put as our product of the month that was released on April 1st was the wizard tradition Beardomancy, and then we followed it up with 2 subsequent products. So there is technically all 12 classes of D&D that have some aspect of Beardomantic power.
Yeah, there's terrible ideas and bad hair day.
Yes.
Oh my god.
So whether you want to play, the College of Style Bard, or my favorite, the Barbarian.
Oh my god.
You're welcome. So like we did all of these kind of things, and it was absolutely fantastic. But you can go check those out over on nerdarchy.com as well. So comic wise, they are awesome. Overpowered or not balanced. I don't tend to go in that direction. If it seems like it's too much, I push it aside and just forget about it, because I don't want to play something that's overbalanced, because I don't want to attribute to someone's not fun.
I'm pretty sure on D&D Beyond there is the homebrew paladin oath of throwing it back. So there's always.
Wait, did someone actually make that? I knew they were gonna. I knew someone was gonna do it. I didn't know if someone already did it.
There is plenty of awesome and hilarious homebrew stuff over on D&D Beyond. So definitely should check that out.
Dang it! All right, chat. Dang it, we were too late. I mentioned like, hey, one-shot questers, I will make the throwing it back paladin. You just hit me up and I'll do it. I'll make it happen. All right. Well, maybe next time, Auroraverse. But hey, I think probably the most comical homebrew subclass. It's kind of serious, but not really. Have you guys ever seen or read about the homebrew pugilist class?
I think I have a while back.
It's pretty much, it's kind of like a little bit of monk, but it's more like instead of like, oh, you're all about balance key and all that sort of stuff, you're more of like a street fighter, right? You're a bosser, all that sort of whole thing. And they had a variation. Go ahead.
Didn't Old Spice do the gentleman character class for Pathfinder a couple years back?
I wouldn't know.
I think that happened, but
it's like they did it as a PR thing.
But So for this sort of thing, that subclass, or they had a subclass, I think it was called like the Luchador, and the whole thing or whole gimmick was you had a entirely different persona. You had a mask or whatever it may be, and you cannot let the party or anybody in the entire world ever see you unmasked or be able to connect the dots between you and the fact that you're an actual Luchador. And if you did, you lost the entire subclass. So you had to come up with all these sort of ridiculous ways, and then you'd even be able to come up with your own like WWE finishing move and all this sort of ridiculousness. I'm a huge WWE fan, so I was just like, oh my god, I love this. It's too good.
Yeah, I have a friend who very much was checking that out because like yourself, is into the wrestling scene, and I was like, all right, if that's your style, that's what you want to do, go for it, man. I'm here for it.
So this is yeah, let's make sure we get to this question. So make sure I got this right. I'll save that one for the final question, but Ted, if you want to answer this one. So this is from Jody Pye, and they were asking, so Nerdarchy, what to you defines a DM? What is the main foundation to being a dungeon master? Like, is it to know all the rules and books to make someone a good DM, or is it like a good sense of storytelling, narration? What is maybe your biggest thing of like, okay, this is what you need to kind of do if you want to be a quote-unquote good DM?
It's a tough question because every good GM really gives what the players at their table need. There are some GMs out there who can tell a fantastic story, but don't really have the foundation with the rules and can cite page numbers and that kind of stuff. But you can still be a fantastic GM if you've got a table that you can just be like, hey George, what's the ruling on this? And George at the table will be like, oh yeah, here's how that particular thing plays out. And then you get back to the story. You don't need to have the foundation with that. I've watched, games where the GM knows the rules, but isn't great with coming up with things, improv, but knows enough to just be like, all right, I want to give my players agency. So you tell me what the name of this person is, or, some interesting fact about them, what have you. So like, you can be a great GM and not be able to do every aspect of sitting behind the GM screen and do it all. I've gotten better as a GM when, players, ask, oh, well, can I do this or can I do that? Sure, all right, let's see if we can find a way to make that happen. Or, you have a player at the table who takes excellent notes and therefore can kind of sum up what's happened over the last session and be that aid for the DM so that you don't have to worry about, okay, what little tidbit did I just throw out there off of improv that I forgot to write down? I've had players tell me something that I'm like, I don't remember saying that before, but you know what? You wrote it down. You remember it? Fine. I'll add that to my notes. And that's, that's helped me out immensely. So like, I feel, to make the very long-winded thing, wrapped up in a short answer, being able to provide a fun and entertaining session for the table and give them what they're looking for, regardless of what aspect of, the pillars of the game that you want to do, what's what they want to do.
Yeah, 100% agree. 100% agree. I honestly can't even put it better. Because that's sort of a thing, like, even just if you want to sum it up to, like, adaptability from table to table. I mean, hey, you can be good at one sort of thing, like really, really good at voices, or good at sort of making cool little plot lines and all that sort of stuff, right? But that might not be what another group cares about, and, but having that bit of adaptability and being able to be proficient in a whole bunch of other things and pulling out or utilizing things whenever you need to, that's the bread and butter. That's what you kind of got to do. So another question that we had, we got about 2 more questions that we can quickly rapid fire before we run out of time. So let's get into, let's get into this one. So this is from my good friend Synthetic Ducky. They were saying, and this is to pretty much everybody, so what do you all think the next edition of D&D will be? And do you also think the help of mainstream media and also COVID-19 bringing more people together to try D&D, whether it be online or whatever, do you see a new edition eventually being made, or do you see 5e constantly being updated and revised, similar to kind of how MMOs kind of work? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I hope the next edition is very far away, but I know that you know, eventually they will come out with a new edition. It always happens. But you know, they're talking about basically 5.5 in 2024.
Something.
I think they said.
I think it's 2024. Yeah.
Yes.
And so maybe they will just try and keep doing the updates, right? You know, I think the thing to look for is if D&D ever gets acquired by a new company, right? Or you see a complete change of the wizard, you know, the D&D team, and you know, and if sales start to drop off, but like they've been steadily growing. There's been a dip in like how much they've grown, but it's still going up. So I imagine as long as it's still going up and making money, they're gonna keep running it. And also, like, they really haven't put out content the way they have in previous years, where like we're getting like a lot of books in a year is like 6 books now, where they used to do that many books in a month, right? Like they used to just churn and burn. So it does feel like they are maybe going for that more of that, you know, modular, video game update where it's like, you know, small tweaks. It's like try, because they don't want to alienate the audience and when they launch a new edition, which usually there's definitely always grumbling.
Yeah, there's always going to be a subset of, you know what, I am tired of the edition wars. I'm going to stick with this particular one. And it's happened with every single edition that's out there. I mean, I was literally looking at a meme today, talking about, you know, the grumpy old men at the old folks home arguing about whether they're playing, you know, first or one of the, you know, editions of second, and they're all just, it's literally just the tagline of them using the original, you know, one of the 4 original D&D logos. Yeah. But it's like there's no stopping. Either the game completely ends and it's gone, which just means that somebody else is going to pick up the torch and try to rebrand what the next D&D thing is without it being D&D, or they're going to make a new edition. Right. And with D&D being the strongest and most played TTRPG that's out there, it's impossible, in my opinion, for the game to ever just go away. You know, so you're gonna have another edition of D&D. There's gonna be 6th and 7th and 8th eventually at some point in time. Whether that be 100 years from now, I don't know. But you know, it's gonna continue, and it's gonna evolve, and it's gonna change based off of what the hobby does as a whole. You know, there's talks about bringing in aspects of streaming, you know, into a rule set, so that, you know, if you want to take in, you know, to consideration this and consideration that, and there's definitely people who are very much against that, whereas other people who are all for it, because, you know, some guidelines of what should be said or what shouldn't be said while you're on the air, because it can technically affect watchers and what their opinion is of the game because of what somebody said. You know, all right, sure, you can take that into consideration.
Yeah, 100%. So that is, or that question. We got one last question that we can probably squeeze on in for you guys. So this is a big one that my friend Matt, that they sent over towards me. So this is specifically to you guys, Nerdarchy. So what is, and this is more on the content creation side of things, what is your writing schedule like? How do you organize your content for Nerdarchy, and not just outlines for the video content, but for the blog and article content on the site as well? Some things of like, how do you come up with topic ideas, outline them, schedule them, and keep kind of the productivity flowing? Asking as a fellow blogger who struggles with ADHD.
Sure. So our process right now, and you know, we'll open full disclosure, and Dave can yell at me if I'm giving away too much, but we have 2 meetings a week, where it's, you know, Dave, Doug, and myself. Doug runs our website. Then we have Dave and I sit down on Tuesdays to kind of go over our video planning, and what we do in that Tuesday meeting is to discuss what things we're producing or what we're going to record the next day. We come up with our outline and our flow for usually what those 3, occasionally 4 videos are going to be. The Monday and Friday meetings that we have, we discuss, what things need to be dealt with in regards to sponsorships, what things need to be done for any other side projects and stuff that we have going on, whether it be our character builds, whether it be, products that we're putting up on the website, whether it's, like right now I talked about the Mage Forge, we talk about what updates, and right now, because we're still kind of collecting that last little bit of art, we talk about, where are we in regards to that? So having regular contact with your, fellow business people, fellow employees, however you want to look at it, allows you to make sure that everything is on the same page. But we also use, an online communication tool. We use Slack so that we have the ability to kind of communicate back and forth when we're not in those meetings. And this allows us to it's 11 o'clock at night. I don't want to forget about this, so I'm going to throw it up in this chat, and we'll talk about this at our next meeting, or what have you.
So I think your friend, is it you said Matt?
Yes.
Yeah, I think Matt's talking more kind of from a personal, he's probably doing everything. So, one of the things, I was just talking to somebody and they asked me the same thing. They're like, I want to start writing more, but I'm not sure what to write about, where, how to kind of plan it out. So if you sign up for a Google AdWords account, you can look on there and you can search keywords. Yeah. And you search keywords having to do with the hobby, that's one way, and find things that are that are competitive and people are looking for. That you can make a list from there. You can also use the predictive text from YouTube. If you type in D&D or Dungeons and Dragons or tabletop role-playing games, see what it fills in next. Right. And you can even look at that content and see what's out there. So basically you just form a list of, here are all the things that maybe I want to talk about. So you can work your way through the list. And the next is just to come up with a schedule and try and stick to it. Are you going to write 1 article a week? Are you going to write 1 article a month, 1 article a day, whatever that schedule is that you find is going to work for you, and also not burn you out as well, depending on whatever else you have going on. You can also look at different trends. You can look at Twitter trends that are going on, so you can stay relevant with that stuff. Now, trends can be tricky because they're not always going to be evergreen. That's another thing, writing, trendy content versus evergreen content, where trendy stuff is this is going on right now, and it might have a chance of, catching on. But once that trend dies, so does that content. Or evergreen content where, it may not, go like gangbusters right out the gate, but it has the ability to consistently perform over time because it's something that's going to be valuable information, as long as people are playing the game. So those are different strategies that you can employ. And, the other thing is just kind of setting up a schedule that works for you. If you, for whatever reason, you can block out 8 to 10 Monday nights, then do that, figuring out what is manageable and working from there.
Hold on 1 second. I was dealing with one sort of thing in the background. There we go. All right. So, hey, hopefully, I was kind of a little bit confused on exactly which sort of angle that Matt was sort of coming from, or what he was trying to specifically answer with that question. So hopefully, Matt, you'll be able to have a little bit of an answer or sort of direction on where to go from either Ted's answer or Dave's answer. Now, that being said, we sadly have come to the conclusion of our little show here. But before we break everything down, we always have a little bit of a tradition that we do on the D&D Sensei show, where it's basically we give off the likes of the audience a little bit of piece of advice or a little bit of knowledge for them to sort of take home and sort of maybe be able to apply. Now, I've said this sort of knowledge, or I'll probably go first to give you guys a general idea of maybe what you'd want to say. And it can be about just generally anything. It could be about D&D, it could be about just life, whatever it may be, right? But just something to leave them with, right? So my philosophy when it comes to D&D, I always have a bunch of new players. They may sort of walk up to me, whether I'm streaming or whatever in general. It's like, hey, Sensei, so I don't know exactly how this D&D game works or whatever, but how do you win D&D? How do you win Dungeons and Dragons or whatever? And I'm like, well, all right, little Timmy, sit down. Let me explain something to you real quick. Well, to win D&D, you have to do two things. It's a simple two-step process. Number one, you have to have fun. You have to have fun. You literally have to, because that's kind of the point of the game. We're here to play a game to really enjoy ourselves and do all of that sort of stuff. So if you're not having fun, then what the heck are you doing? And then number two is you have to make sure everybody's comfortable to pretty much express themselves. If you're not comfortable to express yourselves, then you're probably not going to do step number one, which is to have fun. So if you combine these two sort of things, then hey, everybody's having a good time, everybody's comfortable to be themselves or do whatever they need to do, you're winning D&D. It's as simple as that. So that's always been my sort of go-to kind of mantra or motto or whatever when it comes to Dungeons and Dragons. What would your guys' sort of, just a little bit of piece of advice that you'd give the chat or anybody watching?
Sure. I mean, my advice, whether you're playing D&D, you're the dungeon master, you're the player, or even just in life in general, I heard this, I'm not inventing it, anything here, but I think it's great advice. You have one mouth and two ears, so you should listen twice as much as you speak.
I like that. Listen twice as much as you speak.
That's a wise piece of advice. And sadly, you're gonna end with me, and I don't have one as good as that. But I would say take agency. If you're DMing, it's the opposite. Give agency. Allow the players to describe what they're doing, describe how they're doing something. You can get into mechanics all day, but that doesn't say what things look like. That doesn't give you a visual. If you're a player, describe what you're doing. Take part in the world, and showcase through your descriptions as best you can. You don't have to. You're not writing a novel here, but be in the world that you're in. And when you have agency in it, it's going to give you a little bit of control. And that's one of the reasons why I feel some people get into tabletop RPGs is because they feel like they don't have enough control on their own life. So if you can enact control in your fictional world, hopefully it can help you alleviate some of the issues and stress of the real world.
Heck yeah, well said. And that being, everything sort of concluded. Again, I want to thank you, Nerdarchy Ted and Nerdarchy Dave, for being able to be on the likes of the D&D Sensei show. You guys were fantastic guests. And if you want to real quick, just plug any of your stuff that you guys are working on, any of that, feel free to do so now.
Yeah, sure. Check us out on YouTube, Nerdarchy, on the website at Nerdarchy, and also Ted had mentioned we're taking pre-orders for the Mage Forge. You can either do that through BackerKit and the Kickstarter page, or even over on the website itself.
Heck yeah.
That's just nerdarchy.com, so you can check it out. We got content over on the YouTube and the website, on a regular basis. So come check us out, and there's plenty of great content over there.
Awesome. So I'm going to break down stream. Thank you guys again for everybody who was able to tune in. Thank you to the panel guests and more. Have a great rest of your evenings, guys. All right.